In early medieval Europe, a book rarely arrived quickly because a book rarely moved as an object at all. It had to be made one page at a time by hand. Most of that work happened in monasteries, where monks copied texts line by line. Every copy demanded hours, days, sometimes years. That single fact shaped everything. Knowledge spread only as fast as a human hand could write. This method kept books scarce and expensive. Parchment came from animal skins, so even the material carried a cost before ink ever touched it. A mistake meant scraping, rewriting, or starting over. A large book required a steady supply of labour, materials, and time, all tied up in one slow process. So libraries stayed small. Outside a few institutions, most people never held a book at all. And the limits went beyond money. When information travelled at the speed of a scribe, it also travelled under tight control. The texts that got copied were the texts that authorities valued, and anything new spread unevenly and late. A student in one town could learn something years after another town already debated it. Ideas did not circulate. They trickled. In that world, reading stayed a privilege, not a habit. A quiet change arrived before any famous press ever did. Europe began to get paper. The technique travelled west from the Islamic world, and by the late Middle Ages, paper mills worked in places like Spain and Italy. Compared with parchment, it did not depend on herds and hides. It came from plant fibres, turned to pulp, pressed and dried. The result mattered immediately. Writing stopped being limited by animal skin. Parchment still lasted, but it stayed expensive and slow to supply. Paper undercut it. A sheet cost less, and it came in larger, steadier batches. That changed the math of copying. When the surface became cheaper, the same effort of a scribe produced a book that more people could afford to buy, borrow, or commission. Copying no longer served only the richest patrons. It began to chase a wider market. Demand rose first where reading already had a purpose: cities, universities, and trade centres. Students needed texts to study. Lawyers needed records. Merchants needed contracts, ledgers, and letters that travelled with goods. With paper, paperwork multiplied because it finally made economic sense. More pages entered daily life, and more people expected to find written information when they needed it. Europe had not solved mass production yet, but it had created the hunger for it. In Europe, a new idea started to loosen the grip of the slow, hand-copied page. Instead of writing every letter, craftsmen cut text into a wooden block, inked it, and pressed it onto paper. The same surface produced the same page again and again. That changed everything. Printing became possible as a process, not a one-time act of writing. This method spread first where people wanted quick, familiar messages: short prayers, saints' images, small religious sheets, and public notices. Early woodcut pictures worked perfectly with it because lines and letters could be carved together. A single block could serve a local market for weeks or months. More people held printed words in their hands, but the leap had limits. Every page still demanded its own block, carved in full, before the first copy even existed. One mistake meant recutting the entire surface, and a long book meant dozens, even hundreds of separate blocks to design, carve, store, and replace as they wore down. So block printing sped up small prints, not big libraries. Books stayed difficult to mass produce. In the mid-1400s in the city of Mainz, a man named Johannes Gutenberg worked on a problem that almost nobody tackled directly. Books still came one page at a time, shaped by human hands. Gutenberg did not just want a faster scribe, he wanted a method that repeated itself. If a page could be built, printed, and then built again, copying changed forever. He began thinking in parts, not pages. Instead of carving an entire sheet into a single wooden block, he imagined tiny pieces that each carried one letter. Those pieces could be arranged into lines, locked into place, and used to make an impression on paper. Then came the key twist. After printing, the letters did not disappear. They returned to a pool and served again. That idea, movable, reusable type, pushed printing from craft toward process. It meant one set of letters could produce many pages and many copies of each page without starting from scratch every time. Gutenberg kept testing how to keep the letters aligned, how to rebuild the same page reliably, how to turn text into something mechanical. In Mainz, a new system started taking shape. Gutenberg's idea of movable type needed one thing to stop being a clever concept and start being a working system. The letters had to survive thousands of impressions without changing shape. Wood wore down, soft metals bent. So he turned to a tougher answer, small pieces of metal type, each one a single letter made to a consistent size so they fit together tightly. That durability meant a page could be built, printed, taken apart and built again. But even strong type failed if the ink failed. The older inks used for handwriting were water-based, and they slid on metal instead of sticking. They spread, they blotted, they produced fuzzy letters that changed from page to page. Gutenberg matched the metal with a different chemistry, an oil-based ink that gripped the type cleanly and transferred predictably to paper. The result was simple but decisive. Each impression looked like the one before it. This pairing changed what printing could be. With durable metal letters, the same set of type could work day after day, not just for one short run. With oil-based ink, the page stopped being an experiment and became a repeatable product. Consistency made speed useful, because speed without consistency only created more mistakes. Now a shop could plan for volume. Not dozens of pages, hundreds, then thousands, reliably and at a level of clarity earlier methods rarely sustained. Movable type and the right ink solved only part of the puzzle. The bigger problem stayed physical. How did you push paper onto a bed of tiny metal letters with the same force every time? Gutenberg borrowed a proven idea from wine and olive making. A screw press did not hit or smear. It tightened down, slowly and evenly, and it spread pressure across the whole page. That change turned printing into a controlled action. The type sat locked in a frame so nothing shifted. Ink got rolled on in a thin, repeatable layer, not dabbed on at random. A fresh sheet went into place, the screw came down, and the page took the impression. Then the press lifted, the sheet came out, and the type stayed ready for the next one. Now the parts finally worked as one machine. Set the type once, and it served again and again. Ink behaved the same each pull. Pressure stayed consistent, so letters looked sharp instead of crushed on one side and faint on the other. This became a workflow. Arrange, ink, press, remove, repeat. Identical pages stopped being a hope. They became a routine. The real test came when Gutenberg aimed higher than small jobs and single pages. He set out to print a full Bible, the most demanding book of all, with hundreds of pages that had to match from start to finish. If the letters drifted or the ink failed, the whole idea collapsed. But page after page came out sharp, even, and controlled. The machine did not just copy text, it produced a standard. People compared it to the best handwritten Bibles they knew. And the surprise was simple. It looked just as good, sometimes better, and it stayed consistent across every copy. That mattered more than beauty. It proved repeatability. A manuscript was one skilled person's long effort, full of small differences. This was the same book again and again, with fewer errors creeping in. Reliability became a product. Once the Bible existed, the press stopped looking like a risky workshop trick and started looking like a business. Buyers saw value they could trust. Investors saw a way to put money into a system that returned predictable results. And rivals paid attention because the advantage was now measurable. Faster output, steady quality, and copies that matched. The success did not end the competition. It created an industry worth competing for. Once the press proved it could deliver a Bible that looked authoritative and repeatable, the technique stopped being a local curiosity. It moved. Printers and skilled workers carried the know-how from city to city, and workshops appeared wherever there were students, courts, merchants, and churches with money to spend. Each new shop meant more than a machine. It meant a team. Typecasters, compositors, pressmen, proofreaders, and binders. This created a new kind of economy around words. Authors no longer depended only on patrons or slow copying. They found printers willing to take risks on titles that could sell. Translators became valuable because a successful book in one city could be remade for another language market nearby. Publishers started to think in lists and audiences, not single commissions. A hit text did not stay local. It moved along trade routes and was reprinted again and again. And that was the real change. Printing connected Europe into a working network of replication, a manuscript culture scaled by labor, one page at a time. Print scaled by coordination. Printers exchanged type designs, shared corrections, copied successful formats, and competed to be faster and cheaper. News, sermons, textbooks, and arguments crossed borders with a speed no scriptorium could match. Ideas still needed readers, but now they found them sooner and in larger numbers. Once presses multiplied, Europe did not just get more books, it got faster agreement on what a text even said. Printers repeated the same pages hundreds, then thousands of times, and that regularity mattered. Scholars across different cities compared identical editions instead of arguing over messy copies. Grammars, maps, and classics circulated in stable forms. The Renaissance gained speed because learning stopped depending on one fragile manuscript. But standard pages also created new fights. When the Bible and religious pamphlets poured out of presses, readers checked claims for themselves line by line, and they did not always accept old explanations. Reformers used print to spread criticism widely, and authorities used print to answer back. The result was not quiet improvement, it was upheaval. The same machine that fixed words in place also multiplied disagreement. Science felt the change too. Observations, diagrams, and methods reached other thinkers quickly, and mistakes got exposed in public. A claim could be copied, questioned, corrected, and reprinted. That pace reshaped power. Debate no longer lived mainly in courts, universities, or churches. It moved onto paper, into shops and homes. Ordinary people read competing texts side by side, and authority had to argue, not just declare. By the time the modern world arrived, Gutenberg's core idea kept working. Information became powerful when it could be copied fast and copied the same way again and again. What began with metal type and a screw press later ran through steam power, factory lines, and cheap paper until books stopped being rare objects and became everyday tools. The change felt simple, but it reshaped everything. Knowledge no longer waited. Publishing grew into an industry that served millions at once. Newspapers refreshed the public's attention every day. Paperbacks carried serious ideas into trains and kitchens. Schools relied on identical textbooks, so whole classrooms learned from the same pages, in the same order, at the same time. That was the old promise of print, expanded. Replication turned learning into a system, not a privilege shared only with the fortunate. Then distribution accelerated again. Digital files moved across oceans in seconds, and a single work reached a global audience without waiting for ink to dry. Yet the basic tensions stayed familiar. Someone still decided what got published, what got promoted, and what got buried. Errors still multiplied when copying became easy. The press never simply delivered truth. It built an infrastructure where ideas could travel, compete, and endure.